Well, hey everybody, it's Sandy, and welcome back to my channel dedicated to helping you advocate for your own health one topic at a time. So today I just wanted to do a video on this question of the safety of some of these antimicrobial fabrics and face masks. And I get this question a lot, and it's pretty much impossible to answer, so there's the spoiler alert, but people are concerned about the safety of inhaling copper, zinc, silver, and things like that. And I can't say I'm not totally unconcerned about that either. So I wanted to talk about that just for a couple of minutes. And then I also want to talk about some of my evolving thoughts on these masks along that mask continuum. So high-tech textiles, hybrid masks, and then pure fabric masks. Yeah, so first of all, there are a few elements that are highly antimicrobial, and namely copper, zinc, and silver. Now, we see all of these used in various high-tech textiles. I feel like I'm seeing a whole lot of silver, and I think that's just because the viral off by Polygene is just a very popular technology. It's a treatment that's done in the finishing stage and added to a fabric to make it profoundly antimicrobial, and that is a silver technology. Now, if you look at literature to compare the antimicrobial action of these different elements, it looks to me like actually the copper is the most potent antimicrobial. However, in studies, that's been shown to be strongly influenced by room humidity. So, for example, copper is far more antimicrobial in a more humid condition, and that's one of the arguments actually against making more surfaces in places like hospitals. Copper, there is some discussion about doing that because microbes don't tend to live as long when sitting on a copper surface versus something like stainless steel. However, the dry environment does partly diminish that antimicrobial action of the copper. And that would actually bode well for face masks, right? So what's the problem with copper? Why don't I have very many copper masks that I've recommended? Well, I have looked at the Argamon mask, and while I like the technology on that one, they are redesigning it. I had some concerns about their previous filter, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with next. I also reviewed a Cupron mask, and I also reviewed a copper compression mask. Now, the issue with copper is that it kind of gets an inflated name for itself. Its reputation is far inflated. Not every copper compound is profoundly antimicrobial. There are only certain ones, like copper oxide, for example. So you have to look at whether it's a particularly antimicrobial copper compound in the product. And most of the fabrics out on the market that claim to be antimicrobial because of the insertion of copper are not one of those highly antimicrobial compounds. The second thing has to do with the amount of copper in the product. It virtually has to be in like every single thread embedded into that fabric, not so much a copper coating, not sort of interspersed amongst the entire textile. And that, I think, is the biggest obstacle, and it makes for the most overinflated claims out there on the market. So every other thing you see, it says copper, antimicrobial, copper, antimicrobial. In reality, most of the items out there on shelves that have copper in them don't have nearly enough to be profoundly antimicrobial, and that's why they don't show you any testing. They just say copper, and they market that as antimicrobial. You have to be really careful about the claims with copper. It does have to be the right compound, and if it's going to be the right compound and enough of the copper material, it still, in my opinion, should show some testing so that you can see how microbes respond to it. And those things all together just make it so that a small percentage of the items out there on the market that have copper really are that profoundly antimicrobial. Now, I think there's a much lower bar for some of the other things that copper does, like, for example, reduction of odors in fabrics, and that's why it's common to see it used with things like workout wear, compression braces, and things like that. But that doesn't make it antimicrobial to the extent that we're looking for in something like a face mask given a pandemic. So while I'm looking forward to seeing the new Argamon mask whenever that comes out, it leaves me with very few copper masks that I can recommend, although I'm always looking. And again, please keep the questions coming and the suggestions coming because I always appreciate that. So that leaves then zinc and silver technologies, both of which are profoundly antimicrobial. Now, again, I see silver a lot just because I think one of the more popular things out there right now is the viral off technology, which is a silver technology. So between silver and zinc, I can say that one thing that does concern me is that nano silver. I do try to stay away from nano silver. I am concerned as to whether the nanoparticles are small enough to be liberated purely by the force of inhaling, and therefore you would be inhaling silver ions, which we know is dangerous, and that has been studied. So I don't want to be inhaling any silver. I have been told that the silver ions in something like Polygene's viral off technology are not nanosilver and therefore are too heavy to be liberated from the fabric purely by the force of breathing. Now that brings me to the million-dollar question, which is, how safe are these all in all? Do we know for sure that we're not inhaling any of these no matter how long we have the mask on? So up until now, I haven't seen that studied. I don't know that there's any evidence one way or another. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm staying away from the nano silver. And, I think that everybody just really has to make the best decision they can for themselves. Like we're all sort of wading through this information that's constantly evolving in the course of this pandemic. And I think we're all making some decisions and some trade-offs. So for me, as long as I stay away from the nano silver, I'm okay with having the antimicrobial technology in my mask. I personally prefer to have something, particularly if I find myself in very risky settings, okay? Settings where you can't socially distance, settings where you're indoors, more people, less ventilation, and things like that. Now, I don't think by any means that this is risk-free. I'd love to say that I think there's no risk at all to breathing through these antimicrobial fabrics. I don't know that. All I know is that just like everything in medicine and healthcare, and frankly in life, we're all sort of picking our issues, right? We're weighing things like this. And my risk assessment is, I feel that it is worth my while given this pandemic. I would rather have something like that antimicrobial technology given the situation. Depends where I am and what setting I'm in. All things being equal, I choose to go ahead and use it. That doesn't mean that's going to be what's best for you or in your comfort zone. And that's really one of the reasons that I do like so many of these reviews on masks. So I do think it's really important to not expect too much out of the antimicrobial technology. So for example, the antimicrobial zinc in the Sono mask is supposed to reduce the bacterial or viral load by 99% in around 30 minutes. Now, the silver technology in viral off, it's supposed to reduce the microbial load by 99% in about 2 hours. So, neither one of these 30 minutes, 2 hours, those are both, relatively long periods of time if you're talking about the opportunity to inhale microbes. So this is sort of like an added layer of protection. It's not really an instead of if you're in risky settings. So I did a video a while back about how I choose which mask is best and how I recommend you choose which mask is best. I'm going to link that video right here. And I said in that video that if you're in risky enough circumstances, really it's unrealistic to expect too much out of your mask. And I think it makes a lot more sense to start thinking about other mitigation factors. So can you get windows open, for example? Can you get fans running? Can you get further away from people? Things like that are not really about the mask. But when everything else was accounted for and it really came down to the mask and choosing a mask in risky settings like that, I didn't rely purely on the technology. I think that it's great that we have it, but I also think it's important to use something in those settings that can be measured against a published standard. And for those of you who've been watching me for a while, the Sandy's DIY Health Advocacy Standard is a little bit more specific than the CDC's published standard because the middle layer for the fabric in the masks, I prefer to have some polypropylene. I wish that I had some better answer about the safety of the antimicrobial technologies in these masks. And while my personal feeling is they are safe and I'm in fact willing to take some risk given the pandemic and use them, I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves. So here's what I will say. Do not use the antimicrobial technology in a way that you behave with a false sense of security. So the antimicrobial technology in these masks is an added layer of protection. No mask substitutes for physical distancing. You shouldn't put on any mask and use it as a substitute for social distancing, because we should all still be following these guidelines. Okay, so that's rule number one. Do not have a false sense of security by using these antimicrobial technologies. It's an added protection. It should not give you a false sense of security so that you can become lax on other rules. Secondly, you want to pay close attention to the manufacturer's instructions as to how long the product lasts, how long it's antimicrobial, not only because it won't be antimicrobial anymore, but because that's the point at which you have to wonder whether the product is breaking down. So this might change my approach a little bit with the viral off technology in the Everbrand mask. The Everbrand mask is really one of my favorite masks. I think the price point is great. The fit is great. I just love it. And it does meet all the criteria for a fabric mask. So I've said in the past that, when the viral off technology is gone, you can still use this and it meets criteria. I still think that's true. But if you are concerned about these particles, and I can see that many people are more concerned than I am. And again, there's really no way to put this to bed because it just hasn't been studied. But given that they do not use a nanoparticle like either a nano silver or a nano zinc, I am not as concerned about that one, and I do continue to use it. But if any of you have any other thoughts on that or comments, just put it in the comments section. I think that if you are concerned about that, whatever your reasons, then you're not going to want to use the mask past the period of time that the manufacturer says, because you do have to wonder whether that product is breaking down. And then finally, you do want to make sure that you follow the instructions as to how you wash the product. So if they say to wash it delicate on cold, you don't want to wash it in a really rough cycle on hot. There's just no way to know what that's doing to these products. So I think it's important to follow the instructions, and I tend to lean toward more delicate. I think that really the sanitation from washing comes from the agitation and from the emulsification from the detergent. I don't think it's really about the temperature. And then I just want to mention something that I did take issue with. I have read some public health experts' opinions, that I can think of, where the consensus was just sort of one of these things where, well, we just can't sort it out. We don't really know anything about how effective these are. There's so many copper things on the market, for example, that are not even effective, that let's just say that all of these are a waste of money. So that's what I call like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I just think that that's just sort of the lazy approach. And sometimes I do see that when it comes to like health recommendations, public health recommendations. I think we've all seen that, where sometimes we just can't sort it out. So we're just going to say that all of these are a waste of money and just wear a plain old fabric mask. And, really, if it's about money, I'm not really looking to health experts to tell me what to spend my money on. I don't know about you guys, but I sort of don't feel like that should factor in. I think they should be commenting on the health issue, and then I'll decide whether I want to spend my money, whether if they think that's wasteful, that's not really their issue. My answer to that is that that's just sort of, we're throwing our hands up because we can't evaluate every single one of these on the market. And that is why when I look at a mask that has technology in it and I review it for my channel, I always look for testing. I always look for empirical testing, not just something like, here's how copper is antimicrobial. No, they have to test their particular product. And I really think that's the answer to that. Now, I don't expect, anybody in public health or any other industry to go look at every single mask on the market, but I do think that as a consumer, I'm free to compare as I wish, and there certainly are manufacturers out there that are doing the testing. I think that, my hat's off to those who are manufacturing these things and selling them to the public, making them available to us. And if there's something out there that works, I want to know about it, and I want the opportunity to test it out, and people can decide for themselves whether they want to use them. So I don't think I put too much stock in these like overly broad statements like, yeah, they're great, or no, don't use them. But let me know what you guys think about that as well. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Basically, don't get too much of a false sense of security. Make sure you're using the technology the way it's supposed to be used. And I don't worry about recommendations that are too overbroad. I do look at testing. And finally, we're all making some decisions for ourselves. We're all taking some risks here, and deciding how risk adverse you are on this one thing is also a decision about how risk adverse you are about this pandemic. So let me know what you think about that. Let me know if this was helpful or if it brought up more questions than it answered. So I hope that it was helpful. And guys, I do hope to be getting that Argamon mask pretty soon, or seeing what they come out with at least, so I can look at it on paper. make a decision. I did hear that Synovia has come out with some new mask styles, and I recently got an email from them saying that they're sending me some, so I'm looking forward to trying those out, and I'll let you know what I think. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.